Chapter 7. True date, June 6th. Subjective date, May 13th. Same year. My records say that this morning was just like the other four. Hell. 1 o'clock. The president, looking like a sad old man, though he's only 44, reported the catastrophe. All 37 rockets were blown up by their own H-bombs about 3,000 miles from the ball. We saw some photographs of them taken from the orbiting labs. They weren't very impressive. No mushroom clouds, of course, and not even much light. The ball has weapons we can't hope to match. If it can activate our H-bombs out in space, it should be able to do the same to those on Earth's surface. My God. It could wipe out all life if it wished to do so. Near the end of the speech, the president did throw out a line of hope. With a weak smile, he was trying desperately to give us his big vote-winning one. He said that all was not lost by any means. A new plan, called Project Toro, was being drawn up even as he spoke. Toro was Spanish for bull, I thought, but I didn't say so. Carol and the kids wouldn't have thought it funny, and I didn't think it was so funny myself. Anyway, I thought, maybe it's a Japanese word meaning victory or destruction, or something like that. Toro, as it turned out, was the name of a small, irregularly shaped asteroid about 2.413 kilometers long and 1.609 kilometers wide. Its peculiar orbit had been calculated in 1972 by an L. Danielsson of the Swedish Royal Institute of Technology and a W. H. Eep of the University of California at San Diego. Toro, the president said, was bound into a resonant orbit with the Earth. Each time Toro came near the Earth, near was sometimes 12.6 million miles, it got exactly enough energy or kick from the Earth to push it on around so that it would come back for another near passage. But the orbit was unstable, which meant that both Earth and Venus take turns controlling the asteroid. For a few centuries, Earth governs Toro, then Venus takes over. Earth has controlled Toro since AD 1580. Venus will take over in 2200. Earth grabs it again in 2350. Venus gets it back in 2800. I was wondering what all this stuff about this celestial ping-pong game was about. Then the president said that it was possible to land rockets on Toro. In fact, the plan called for many shuttles to land there carrying parts of huge rocket motors, which would be assembled on Toro. When the rockets were erected on massive and deep stands, power would be applied to nudge Toro out of its orbit. This would require many trips by many rockets with cargoes of fuel and spare parts for the motors. The motors would burn out a number of times. Eventually, though, the asteroid would be placed in an orbit that would end in a direct collision with the ball. Toro's millions of tons of hard rock and nickel steel would destroy the ball utterly, would turn it into pure energy. Yes, I said aloud, but what's to keep the ball from just changing its orbit? Its sensors will detect the asteroid, it'll change course. Toro will go on by it, like a train on a track. This was the next point of the president's speech. The failure of the attack had revealed at least one item of information. Or, rather, verified it. The radiation of the H-bombs had blocked off, disrupted, all control and observation of the rockets by radar and laser. In their final approach, the rockets had gone in blind, as it were, unable to be regulated from Earth. But if the bombs did this to our sensors, they must be doing the same to the balls. So, just before Toro's course is altered to send it into its final path, H-bombs will be set off all around the ball. In effect, it will be enclosed in a sphere of radiation. It will have no sensor capabilities, nor will the ball believe that it will have to alter its orbit to dodge Toro. It will have calculated that Toro's orbit won't endanger it. After the radiation fills the space around it, It won't even be able to see that Toro is being given a final series of nudges to push it into a collision course. The project is going to require immense amounts of materials and manpower. The USA can't handle it alone. Toro's is going to be a completely international job. What one nation can't provide, the other will. The president ended with a few words about how Project Toro, plus the situation of memory loss, is going to bring about a radical revision of the economic setup. He's going to announce the outlines of the new structure. Not just policy, but structure. 2 days from now. It'll be designed, so he says, to restore prosperity and, not incidentally, rid society of many problems plaguing it since the Industrial Revolution. Yes, but how long will Project Toro take? I said. Oh, Lord. How long? 6 years, the president said, as if he'd heard me. Perhaps longer. 6 years. I didn't tell Carol what I could see coming, but she's no dummy. She could figure out some of the things that were bound to happen in 6 years, and none of them were good. I never felt so hopeless in my life, and neither did she. But we do have each other, and so we clung tightly for a while. May 18th isn't forgotten, but it seems so unimportant. Mike and Tom cried, I suppose because they knew that this exhibition of love meant something terrible for all of us. Poor kids. They get upset by our hatreds, and then become even more upset by our love. When we realized what we were doing to them, we tried to be jolly, but we couldn't get them to smile. Subjective date, 4 years earlier than the objective date. I'm writing this since I couldn't get any new tapes today. The shortage is only temporary, I'm told. I could erase some of the old ones and use them, but it'd be like losing a vital part of myself. And God knows I've lost enough. Old Mrs. Douglas next door is dead. Killed herself according to my note on the calendar, April 2nd of this year. I never would have thought she'd do it. She was such a strong fundamentalist, and these believe as strongly as the Roman Catholics that suicide is well nigh unforgivable. I suspect that the double shock of her husband's deaths caused her to take her own life. April 2nd was the day she had died. She had to be hospitalized because of shock and grief for 2 weeks after his death. Carol and I had her over to dinner a few times after she came home, and all she could talk about was her dead husband. So I presume that as she traveled backward to the day of his death, the grief became daily more unbearable. She couldn't face the arrival of the day he died. Hers is not the only empty house on the block. Jack Bridger killed his wife and his 3 kids and his mother-in-law and himself last month, according to my records. Nobody knows why, but I suspect that he couldn't stand seeing his 3-year-old girl become no more than an idiot. She'd retrogressed to the day of her birth, and perhaps beyond. She lost her language abilities and could no longer feed herself. Strangely, she could still walk, and her intelligence potential was high. She had the brain of a 3-year-old, fully developed, but lacking all post-birth experience. It would have been better if she hadn't been able to walk. Confined to a cradle, she would at least not have had to be watched every minute. Little Anne's fate is going to be Tom's. He talks like a 5-year-old now. And Mike's fate, my fate, Carol's. God, we'll all end up like Anne. I can't stand thinking about it. Poor Carol. She has the toughest job. I'm away part of the day, but she has to take care of what are, in effect, a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, getting younger every day. There is no relief for her, since they're always home. All educational institutions, except for certain research laboratories, are closed. The president says we're going to convert 90% of all industries to cybernation. In fact, anything that can be cybernated will be. They have to be. Almost everything, from the mines to the loading equipment to the railroads and trucks and the unloading equipment and the arrangement and dispersal of the final goods at central distribution points. Are 6 years enough to do this? And who's going to pay for this? Never mind, he says. Money is on its way out. The president is a goddamned radical. He's taking advantage of this situation to put over his own ideas, which he sure as hell never revealed during his campaign for election. Sometimes I wonder who put the ball up there. But that idea is sheer paranoia. At least, this gigantic WPA project is giving work to those who are able to work. The rest are on, or going to be on, a minimum guaranteed income. And I mean minimum. But the president says that, in time, everybody will have all he needs and more in the way of food, housing, schooling, clothing, etc. He says. What if Project Toro doesn't work? And what if it does work? Are we then going to return to the old economy? Of course not. It'll be impossible to abandon everything we've worked on. The new establishment will see to that. I tried to find out where Myrna lived. I'm making this record in my office, so Carol isn't going to get hold of it. I love her. Myrna, I mean. Passionately. I hired her 2 weeks ago and fell headlong, burningly in love with her. All this was in 1977, of course, but today, inside of me, is 1977. Carol doesn't know about this, of course. According to the letters and notes from Myrna, which I should have destroyed, but thank God, never had the heart to do. Carol didn't find out about Myrna until 2 years later. At least that's what this letter from Myrna says. She was away visiting her sister then and wrote to me in answer to my letter. A good thing, too. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what went on then. My reason tells me to forget about Myrna, and so I will. I've traveled backward in our affair. From our final bitter parting to this state, when I was most in love with her. I know this because I've just reread the records of our relationship. It began deteriorating about 6 months before we split up. But I don't feel those emotions now, of course. And in 2 weeks, I won't feel anything for her. If I don't refer to the records, I won't even know she ever existed. This thought is intolerable. I have to find her, but I've had no success at all so far. In 14 days, no, 5, since every day ahead takes 3 more of the past, I'll have no drive to locate her, because I won't know what I'm missing. I don't hate Carol. I love her, but with a cool, much-married love. Myrna makes me feel like a youth again. I burn exquisitely. But where is Myrna? True date, October 30th, a year and 4 months after the ball appeared. I ran into Brackwell Lee, the old mystery story writer, today. Like most writers who haven't gone to work for the government propaganda office, he's in a bad way financially. He's surviving on his GMI, but for him, there are no more first editions of rare books, new sports cars, Western Reserve, or young girls. I stood him 3 shots of the Rock Gut, which is the only whiskey now served at Grover's, and listened to the funny stories he told to pay me for the drinks. But I also had to listen to his tales of woe. Nobody buys fiction, or, in fact, any long works of any kind anymore. Even if you're a speed reader and go through a whole novel in one day, you have to start all over again the next time you pick it up. TV writing, except for the propaganda shows, is no alternative. The same old shows are shown every day and enjoyed just as much as yesterday or last year. According to my records, I've seen the hilarious pilot movie of the Soap Opera Blues series 50 times. When old Lee talked about how he had been dropped by the young girls, he got obnoxiously weepy. I told him that it didn't say much for him or the girls either. But if he didn't want to be hurt, why didn't he erase those records that noted his rejections? He didn't want to do that, though he could give me no logical reason why he shouldn't. Listen, I said with a sudden drunken inspiration. Why don't you erase the old records and make some new ones? How you laid this and that beautiful young thing? Describe your conquests in detail. You'll think you're the greatest Casanova that ever lived. But that wouldn't be true. You, a writer of lies, say that? I said. Anyway, you wouldn't know that they weren't the truth. Yeah, he said. But if I get all charged up and come barreling down here to pick up some tail, I'll be rejected, and so be right back where I was. Leave a stern note to yourself to listen to them only late at night. Say, an hour before the ball puts us all to sleep. That way, you won't ever get hurt. George Palmer wandered in then. Asked him how things were doing. I'm up here handling cases for kids who can't get driver's licenses, he said. It's true you can teach anybody how to drive in a day, but the lessons are forgotten the next day. Anyway, it's experience that makes a good driver, and need I explain more? The kids have to have cars, so they drive them regardless. Hence, as you no doubt have forgotten, the traffic accidents and violations are going up and up. Is that right? I said. Yeah. There aren't too many in the morning, since most people don't go to work until noon. However, the new transit system should take care of that when we get it, sometime in 1984 or 5. What new transit system? I said. It's been in the papers, he said. I reread some of last week's this morning. The city of Los Angeles is equipped with a model system now, and it's working so well it's going to be extended throughout Los Angeles County. Eventually, every city of any size in the country will have it. Nobody will have to walk more than 4 blocks to get to a line. It'll cut air pollution by half and the traffic load by 3/4. Of course, it'll be compulsory. You'll have to show cause to drive a car. I hate to think about the mess that's going to be. The paperwork, the pileup in the courts, and so forth. But after the way the government handled the LA riot, the rest of the country should get in line. How will the rest of the country know how the government handled it unless they're told? They'll be told. Every day, he said. Eventually, there won't be enough time in the day for the news channels to tell us all we'll need to know, I said. And even if there were enough time, we'd have to spend all day watching TV. So who's going to get the work done? Each person will have to develop his own viewing specialty, he said. They'll just have to watch the news that concerns them and ignore the rest. And how can they do that if they don't know what concerns them until they've run through everything? I said, day after day. I'll buy a drink, he said. Liquor's good for one thing. It makes you forget what you're afraid not to forget.